Allow me to ask this question. We have seen several developments in the Nairobi County Assembly. How far are we? Is your job safe?
Well, jobs come from God with the season, with the season. And this Monday is my season, not to talk about a job, but to talk about as women, Kenya, I've seen referendum and all that. I'm asking myself, where are the women before they start now diluting everything? But at the same time, I think it's in court. So I would leave it with the courts. And we are not in court for a political contest, no. We went in court just to understand how can we ensure we will never set a precedence where processes are not respected. Just that. Okay. Yes.
Okay, all right. And wish you well in that entire process. Now, as you said, we want to focus on what has been making headlines, especially over the weekend, and it's also making headlines on the newspapers. You can look at the front page of The Standard. It talks about, we are ready, but it will cost you billions. This is the IEBC boss, that is Wafula Chebukati, indicating that the referendum that is being proposed could cost up to 12 billion shillings so that it can be conducted. But as we had said earlier, this is a process that hasn't yet begun. The country does not still know what specific issues will be on offer during the referendum. But maybe we can start with that confusion that we currently have. There are those politicians who are saying we should have this referendum led by Raila Odinga, the ODM party leader. And then you have on this other side the Jubilee Party sort of feeling uncomfortable with this discussion. A few days ago, I think 1 or 2 days, the Deputy President said that he has no problem with the referendum as long as it's not a form of hypocrisy being used by politicians. I don't know, you both, where you stand with this proposal to have a referendum. Is it necessary in the current Kenya that we have?
Well, first I'll start by saying with the confusion, because now we're going to confuse ourselves more. And I would wish as a country we carry each agenda as we move on. I know all of us, well, for me, I would say, I know Kenyans would wish we have this, which is okay, because when you look at everything that is happening, it is also within that constitution that we are finding that confusion and not understanding some of the things and the governances that we have. But we should understand that let us not lose focus. One, we have census coming in, it's going to cost us billions.
Sure.
Yeah? We have boundaries, and it's within the constitution that we need to deal with. It's going to cost us billions. Well, they say democracy is also very expensive, but at the same time, let us do one thing at a time. For me, if you ask me, 2019, we have to do census. How are we doing it? How are we prepared about it? Is very critical. Do we have the money? We now see how the shilling is struggling, how Kenyans are struggling. I'm even worried that after we passed the VAT bill, I'm wondering whether we were able to exempt our elderlies from the monies that the president has given them, the government has given them. Because you might find, when I look at the charges now, what the banks are charging, will the elderly get their money, or will it be all gone through the deductions? So those are some of the things I would wish members of parliament should be looking now thoroughly through the bill. What did we pass? What is there that is going to affect, again, Kenyans? And we see them crying the way our elders in Eldoret were crying about maize. So this is okay, yes. But are we ready for it? Should be the question of the country. Do we have money or to spend on this? Should be the next question for us to answer.
Jay, what do you think?
I was part of the No Brigade when we were doing in the run-up to the proposed constitution being passed. And I was one of those people who went through the constitution line on line on line. And I will say for a fact, there are several things that needed to be relooked, others needed to be scrapped. And I've even said it before that we have too much detail in our constitution. So does it need a revamp? Indeed it does. What I find difficult to deal with is when the push for the referendum comes from the political class. Because we're in this mess because of a joint effort of the political class who are looking to make things cushy for themselves, people of the civil society and other special interests who pushed in a lot of things that were unnecessary, the time was not yet for the Kenyan people. Sure. And then my profession, who ensured that we had jobs in every single corner of every single commission. We just, I mean, lawyers, we cushioned ourselves well.
Right.
We need to relook at it. But when the politicians drive it, then I get afraid, because what happens is the drama that we had in 2005, the drama that we had in 2010 is what we're setting ourselves up for. The timing for me smacks of political convenience. It is something that's supposed to keep Kenyans excited, engaged, divided, so that you mobilize your core in preparation for 2022. That's what bothers me. It's not something that we've reached a place where as Kenyans we feel, you know what, yeah, it's time for us to do this. Do we need it? Yes. Do we need it now? I'm not too sure. And do we need it this way? I don't think so. If it was Kenyans who have coalesced, we've written letters to our members of parliament, we have told them we want this and that done, we have written to the IEBC, we have even started collecting signatures, it would be a people-led process. I'd be the first one to stand at Kencom collecting signatures. But this one, at rallies, at political rallies and funerals, I'll be the first one saying, no, just leave it alone first until the politicians lose interest.
Talking of collecting signatures, there's one by one party leader of the Third Way Alliance, Ekuru Court, that talks about Punguza Mzigo, where they're intending to reduce the number, or rather the size of representation, reducing the parliamentarians from 416 to up to 194. And when he was here last week, he said that they had already gotten about 500,000 signatures, which they are doing both manually and digitally. So already that's a process that is ongoing. The IBC is aware that it's ongoing. But what is getting more momentum and hype is what the politicians are saying in political rallies and gatherings. So the question is, even as all this discussion continues, where then do we find an opportunity to inform Kenyans that this is the concerns that we rightfully have about the Constitution?
Well, first of all, I know the Punguza Mzigo, in fact, Moses Kuria started the process more earlier. I don't know how many signatures he collected then, Honorable Moses Kuria. I know Kenyans feel, yes, Punguza Mzigo, which we all agree on that. What we are saying is it will get lost in this scenario. Okay, I look at the presentation of my former Prime Minister, and I agree, yes, if we can go back to 14, it will be good. Reasons are, already you find counties coming together in blocks of trade. And I think the most important thing is, how do you trade? How do you people benefit? Because when you're alone, you're not benefiting. Until you have to come back, create all these blocks again of trade. I know we shall be celebrating that in Bomet very soon, 13 or 14 counties coming together. So fine. If we can cluster and say, in purposes of trade, in purposes of seeing how we move on together, yes, we need the 14. But at the same time, you have to put in your mind that every county has had to have some resources that goes there. Now, the national government has to come in and say they will remain administratively that way, and they will always get their share of development that way. If you convince Kenyans that way, then they will allow themselves to say, fine, then within the 14 we are covered. But as Joy says, politically we will lose the agenda. Why? Every place we want to pull and safeguard ourselves and say we are this. And now we are doing this in two ways. I would support my Prime Minister with only one reason. Because I know when we are going to census, it's going to be very political. And people will even go to court. You remember, Joy, when last time when we did the census in 2009, people crafted the census. They knew. They were beyond even government. They were thinking, we know money is going to come. It is going to come through counties. So we must have the numbers. Right. Population-wise, we must increase. Now, and that is why you might look at it and say, you need to safeguard yourself before, again, we go into the same scenario. Sure. You go into census and people tell you we are 2 million, yet they are 1 million.
So the question I want to ask is, when you say that we can review the law to allow for 14 regions or something close to that,
I was just saying I agree with the proposal, but I don't know.
Right. Do you necessarily need to change the law, the constitution and the laws that are, to ensure that counties are able to cooperate economically?
No.
No?
So the cooperation is not a matter of changing the law. That's what they're doing now. They can do it. Even counties can decide, by the way, we are going to collaborate in this and that area. Because, you know, for example, every province used to have a provincial agriculture officer. Yeah. Now every county is supposed to have one. We can say, look, one guy used to be able to serve the whole of Embu. Why are we now breaking it down so that he goes here and there? No, let's all just hire one guy amongst these several counties. So they can do it. What needs the law to change is if we're going to break them down and say, look, instead of having 3 counties, we will go back to what used to be 1 province. We leave each of those counties as a sub-county, like Senator says, so that each of them still remains administratively, and in terms of resources, you remain organized as you are now. But in terms of governance, we make it less.
Doesn't that work against the principle of devolving power and resources that informed this Constitution of Kenya 2010?
Not necessarily, because one argument that I had against our current structure of devolution is that our 47 counties are each too small to be financially and economically viable. And what that does is what we are seeing now. They're always dependent on national government for resources. What that does, it further undermines the very spirit of devolution, because you're supposed to be able to regenerate resources, hire people, and move your people forward. So that what you get from national government only supplements. But if you are in a place where if national government decides tomorrow they're not talking to the counties, that the counties actually grind to a halt, then that is not real devolution. That's what we had before. It was this administration that's been distributed. So if you're going to have viable, for example, if what we had before as Coast it was still 1 county, you're talking resources all the way from what you have at the National Park in the Savo, all the way to what you have in Lamu. That would all be under 1 government. You can actually collect enough money to run your county government. But now when you break it down into Kwale a little bit, Kilifi a little bit, Mombasa a little bit, what happens is the resources don't flow as freely, and then even the facilities to create more, to generate more wealth, become hampered. Because something might be like what we have in Nairobi now. The water is flowing from Moranga, but it is being used in Nairobi. So Moranga says, oh, we are putting a boundary here, you must pay cess before it crosses.
Sure.
Some of these things are totally unnecessary.
And so looking at all these issues and the proposal to punguza mzigo, do you think that we actually need less members of parliament, less senators to guide the legislative process of this country?
Yes, we do. That one we agree. Because, and by the way, it's not just the politicians. We have to look at the whole structure. Whole structure. Because the problem is we look at the politicians and we think these are the ones who have made everything become difficult. No. It is the structure that has made things become difficult. So it's not just the politician, because from the politician, there is another structure here that works again. So we need to ask ourselves, these parallel structures that we create, yet they are all doing the same thing. Is it worth for Kenyans? Is it why we are struggling? And then we need to ask ourselves, are we willing in this structure to say that the national government now can collect all revenues, then distribute? Because look at how we did it. We thought we will leave revenues to our counties, that they will be able to collect local revenue, rebuild themselves. The Constitution gave them how many? At least 4 to 5 years you need to have stabilized. Yet, if you leave them even in 2 years now, they will crunch.
But I had,
we are not having revenue.
Last week I had the governor of Kericho, Paul Chapunis. He was speaking to us through a reporter in Kericho, Martin Koske, and he was saying that when they took over in 2013, the county council at that time was collecting about 100 million shillings every year. Now they are targeting to do 700 million because I think last financial year they were able to do 500 million shillings. So you can see already there's some growth that has been achieved. So if you disrupt that...
In different counties, because if you look at other counties like Narok, they were the most richest counties. They would even give surplus to government. Don't forget the county councils would do all their work and pay all their salary. Now look at us, it's different. Right. We have to go back to national government, and some counties, you'll find if national government has not given them money, 2 months down the line, they have not paid salaries, which is wrong. If you can't afford your own salary, then you have a problem.
And so the solution to that would be to reduce the number of counties.
And not just that, but to make them more economically viable. I wonder what formula people came with to come up with that magic number 47. To this day, I wonder what bright sparks sat down and thought 47 was actually a magic number. In my opinion, it is in a country the size that we are, and also with the sort of tribalism that we are dealing with, the negative ethnicity, breaking it down to the level that we have has made the ethnicity problem in Kenya worse.
That's right. Because
if you're looking at some places, for example, if you look at Meru, when you separate Nithi, Izaraka from Meru, it underlies some age-old clanism that now comes and cements some of those prejudices that they had amongst them. If you look again also in Northeastern, now that's why you have those things of negotiated democracy, because they're like, look, we are not going to be ruled by that clan forever, so we are going to have our own merry-go-round. That means it makes a mockery of democracy, because people don't really get a chance to have their say. It's people who sit down and agree that this is what we're going to do. So we really need to rethink. We want evolution, yes, but how will this Majimbo look like? Let's go back to where it started, Lancaster House. Let's look at that first. What these guys came with, Akina, our heroes, Shikuku, and the ones who went to Lancaster. Because those guys actually were very national-minded. That time there was no Masiasa. We were all looking for Uhuru from Mkoloni. Kenyans were working as Kenyans. Let's look, what did they come up with? Because those are the guys who had the purest intention, and they came out with the formula, I think, that was the best in terms of building national, because there's nobody who could say, "Sisi Waluya to copycat in our own county." No, you had to work with the Tesos, with the Luos, you had to work with the Couriers, the people around you, you had to work together because you're all in one province. And finally, on this topic, do we need a position of an executive prime minister? Do we need to make the president a ceremonial one for a single 7-year term? Surely.
No. Kenyans, East Africa won't buy it. So we can't start. You know, they've looked at us. Kenyans have gone down a constitution. I think Tanzania is saying in Kiswahili, sasa inawakula wenyewe, waona sasa wameanza kuibadilisha. Then now we want to come up. I think what we need to ask ourselves is how because we are talking also of East Africa, we want to work together, we want to cooperate together. Then let us try and have a governance that is a bit similar to each other the way they are today, and it will work. And anyway, Kenyans don't believe in those things. That's another problem. So let's not create again positions that we will come and regret again. Let us look at it. Yes, we want everyone to be in this government, but the how should sit on the table and agree. Yes, and women should be on that table. Exactly. I want to tell Kenyan women, they are just about, as we talk, you know, men are very interesting. When they started the conversation, we didn't know we will arrive to here. No, me, I used to think, it's just a conversation. But you see, it has been pushed. So I want to tell the women of Kenya, you have gains in this constitution. You have the Bill of Rights that will be opened definitely when we come to these issues. We have the affirmative action seats. If you don't sit on the table somewhere and start reorganizing yourselves and looking at what is best, because it's a give and take situation, then you'll be left, and then we will come now begging, knocking the door to be begging those who have done muzingo punguza, siji punguza nini, as tutapunguza nini. And yet it's when women were just joining in.
One of the proposals is that the positions of woman representatives should be scrapped.
And the nominated seats. And you see those are
those are affirmative action seats. So
and one of the
at one point they needed to have gone. So we will,
that is true, but even in
before 20 years, so you can imagine, 20 years we have not achieved. So that is what we should sit on the table and say, if you are removing this, then the 2/3 formula must be in.
On the table.
Yes, and we must go for some election of anything to ensure everyone gets in through an election then.
But what does it say in terms of our ability, once we occupy positions of leadership, what is our ability to really acquire property, whether illegally or legally?
You know, first of all, the saddest part of our country is that we always forget the policy that we brought ourselves in this country, that when I'm in government, I can still do business with government. Yeah, and until we remove that policy, I don't see how we will always follow up and be able to track someone and now tell me that Kidero has to prove which one that I buy legally, which one is not. How will you prove? Until you change that policy. And that is why in this fight of corruption, And at one point I said this, that we need to draw a red line and say, from here, this is where we stop as a country. Yeah? And move. Now move when you're focusing that indeed you're moving and we will never go back to what we are in today. Because the state we are in today, I really sympathize and I ask myself, how are we going to support our president? Because you can see he has the will, but he is in a den of everyone with their own agenda. And for now, it's even worse, because where Kenyans used to call all these things corruption is no longer corruption. It is a deal. So you sit down and you say, this is a deal. You either take the deal or leave the deal. So I am asking myself, fine, when EACC tells us all this, but you gave Kidero the opportunity to vie in 2017.
Right.
So why now? Why are we signing these things to EACC, a form that I state? The Wealth
Declaration forms.
Yes. What is it for? If, fine, it's confidential, but can't you call me and ask me a question that we realize you signed this, but in 2 years we are here. Well, how? How are you creating this? But for now, when you bring and you flash him here for us, you've not helped Kenyans. And the other thing we should ask ourselves, do we really need to be taking them to jail? Because it's a conversation where, for me, if you ask me, then just do an evaluation and a percentage of someone and say, if you have worked for 20 years, within your salary of this and this and this, you would have created wealth worth this. Then I'll say, these are my businesses. Then you say, fine, even if I calculate your businesses, this is what you need to be worth. Freeze the rest, give it back to government, leave him. The best punishment is that you cannot sit in any public office again, maybe for 10 years, and you leave.
And how much of a legal challenge would that be?
It wouldn't be very much of a legal challenge if we followed our rules and our laws as we've placed. One of the things that I find it's an oxymoron, is when you tell people that they should do wealth declaration and then we make those records, we cover them. We cannot look at it. We cannot look and say, I know Joy. She owns a little bit more than that. Because if I'm the one who's filling the form, I'll fill the form to my best light.
Yes.
I'll not fill the form to incriminate myself. The recently concluded process of looking at accounting and procurement officers revealed that there was actually quite a large number of those officers who were able to explain how they got their wealth.
Right.
That means if people are afforded the chance, they can show, okay, this is how I got what I have. But if somebody cannot explain how they got there, then again, because if I know I'm going to steal 20 billion, and all I have to do is cool my heels in prison for 5 years, then I come out and it's all there.
Still do it.
I mean, that's a good payday. I mean, I would take it because prison was made for men. Eh? The ones who go in, they still come out. Even me, I can just go be a model citizen in there, you know, wear my striped uniform with pride, knowing that I am earning my keep. And the state is actually paying money to keep me. We have to become creative with economic crimes. Right. We have to get smarter with economic crimes. And the law has to be made responsive to that. Again, I said, the biggest problem we have in Kenya is that when politicians write some of these laws, they write it to themselves in mind. Tukiandika hii itatushika sana, si itatufunga. If they write laws thinking like that, we will never move forward. But if we come to a place when people become nationalistic, patriotic, and you write laws that actually make sense, there are people who have been able to effectively curtail economic crimes because, like what we're trying to do now, tie your KRA records to your bank account, to your other declared things, and then you see, okay, does this make sense? Because you can tell me Kidero owns all these things, that's absolutely fine. What does it declare to KRA? Is he earning income from all these things, or did he not declare in KRA? So what did he say he owns in KRA? Let's assume that that's what he legally owns. So these are the things if he owns, where did he get them from? Let's be creative in how we do our investigations.
It's something that can be done.
Not just saying, you know, he can't have all this money unless he stole it from someone. And then let's look back, because we're looking at him in terms of former Nairobi governor. Where was he before? Because he can't have done all this while he was Nairobi governor.
That's true.
Let's look back and plow back, because sometimes people enter into power because they have a lot of money. How did they make that money to begin with? Because you might be in power to try and actually sanitize illegally obtained money before. That's so right. Let us become more proactive. Like Honorable Lachi is saying right now, things that we are doing when those clearances that people do when they are seeking public office, can the officers be more robust in checking the forms? Let it not just be a matter of, oh, it's this, stamp, let's go. For example, my profession, you'll find somebody who's been struck off the role of advocates. Why? Because you ate clients' money. And they're like, oh, so he won't get clearance. But the dude goes and finds whoever he took money from, he pays them back, then gets them to write affidavits that, oh, I've been paid back, now I'm fine. That's not the point. You took it in the first place. That's the point.
Yes.
You actually took clients' money. That's the character flaw. It's not money was taken, money has been returned. No. But now, LSK will be like, oh, they've been paid back. Oh, no problem. Here you go. Certificate of good standing. It's ridiculous.
Great. And in Migori, the voters have started casting their ballots to elect their next senator after the demise of the former senator, that is Senator Ben Oluoch, who passed on in June this year. I believe it was June 19th or thereabout. And in that election, there are 6 candidates. Of course, the top candidates are ODM's Ochilo Ayako. He's a former cabinet secretary, or rather cabinet minister for sports. The Federal Party of Kenya has a candidate by the name Eddie Okech. Another candidates are Peter Jobando of Green Congress Party, Solomon Hodo from People's Democratic Party, Samuel Otieno, an independent candidate, and Dixon Ogola, who is also an independent. Of course, that story is highlighted on page 5 of the Daily Nation. And obviously, Stephen Leto is in Migori. He'll be bringing us reports of the progress in terms of voting. It's now 7:09, so they have been voting for about 69, just slightly above an hour. And polling closes at 5 o'clock. So in light of these, do you expect a heated battle in terms of the outcomes, or is it just a confirmation for, I don't want to say the name. I might be accused of campaigning.
Of course, yes.
You would be surprised at how hotly contested this race is.
Yeah.
You know, the fact that it's far away from Nairobi, sometimes we don't get to see the intrigues. But from what I hear on the ground, it was a supremacy not just of the candidates who are running, but of the principals who support the candidates who are running. So it's going to be a battle of the titans. I'm not too sure whether it is a coronation. I think there will be a run. It will be there'll be a run for the money, because people know that the dynamics that are playing out, it's not just choosing a senator. It's actually stating if we are behind this principle or we're behind that principle. There's a lot more riding on it than just a vote.
Right.
And it's a litmus test, I think.
Yes, it is.
To show us how much Kenyans are now thinking independently. If they're still being shepherded into one kraal, or if people are starting to think, you know what, I can make a different choice than what is the popular one. So it's a litmus test for the Kenyans in Migori to show the rest of Kenya if Kenyans are also maturing out of we shall be told what to do. And Parliament set a good precedent of trying to be shepherded and rebelling a little bit. I hope Kenyans are also breaking free of the shackles that tie us.
Some guests that we were hosting last week were saying that that was just for the cameras.
Which one?
The members of parliament, when they were saying that they are opposed to the reforms, I mean, the president
There's a lot of drama. There's a lot of video.
Well, for me, that one, I wish they ganged up together and changed just 2 things. The bank charges, that is too high for any Kenyan, even the M-Pesa people. So for me, I want to beg my politicians, go back and change that thing. That thing is going to hurt. People are not going to bank money. People are going to run away from the banks. So you did not help us by doing 0. But for me, I was wondering, 0 on what? You had 16 and 8.
Yes.
You had nothing else on the table. The only thing you had on the table is to muscle those, you muscle yourself and put the 0 now, you know, and turn all that. So now when you do that, and you could not even remember, there were charges of the bank, you could not even remember. You have the elderly who are supposed to be taken care of and exempted from those charges, because when they get their money from M-Pesa, you can imagine when you're deducting 20%, I don't know what percent on that M-Pesa, they will receive 800 or 600. They will start screaming on the ground. They will, when the president arrives there, he wonders, what is the problem? Kumbe it is that. And they didn't look at it. But anyway, let's go to Migori. As Joy says, I think I want to wish the best candidates. Whoever wins will be the senator of Migori, first of all.
That's true.
But this is a very interesting county because it has it has its own independence. You know what? Not for now. When you look at Migori, even in 2013, in 2013, the governor came in with a small party.
Yes. I think.
So in 2017, he decided, let me join in, and he came back. But then now, here is where now the test of Kenyans will come to pass. And it will help other Kenyans to have that freedom of saying, we can choose regardless of whatever happens. So, but I don't want to say, we will see in the evening. They've had very good competition, which is a good.
That's right.
Yeah, and for me, that young guy showed that young people can come out and you can campaign, and even with the threats that are there, but you will still prove.
That's right.
It does not matter now who wins, but because it's a by-election, and you know now, in a by-election, you use a lot of muscles in terms of mobilizing people to make sure they go.
Yeah.
So that's the challenge maybe the candidates are going to face.
Right.
Let's see how they come out. We have Kuria, let's see how it will perform. So that's why it's a very interesting county to look at. Yeah.
All right, so as we come to the end of the news briefs, I think the other interesting story is about the relief as NCPB starts paying maize farmers. You remember that over the weekend, I think it was on Friday, President Kenyatta was very furious. No, it was on Thursday. He was very furious when he was speaking about the NCPB officials and the Ministry of Agriculture officials who have delayed the payment to farmers. And of course, he was expressing his fury in terms of how money was released, but just to go and pay traders instead of paying the farmers who are supposed to benefit from the premium price of 3,200 shillings per bag of 90 kilograms of maize. So that story is highlighted on page 5 of the Daily Nation in as far as that is concerned. And this is something that you continue to pursue to ensure that you're able to follow the process of these payments being made. But just a quick comment from you. Even as this happens, that we see a president who is very furious about what has been happening, what is the ultimate solution so that when you come up with a policy to help farmers, it actually benefits those people and people do not take advantage in the name of traders who are trying to collect maize from different farmers and putting it together?
One of the things that I find an oxymoron in this country is when, like we are talking about the financial bill, when you make the cost of production so high that you whittle away the profit before it comes to, then government is not a big enough market for the farmer. If this farmer was producing that maize at a cost of 500 bob per bag, then even if he sold it for 900 bob, he'd still have a good return on his investment. But now we make the seeds very expensive. We make the inputs, let's say, very expensive. At the end of the day, then the market becomes suppressed because the same government makes a policy to allow people to import maize.
Right.
The same government makes a policy that caps the price of maize is gonna, or maize flour is going to be this much.
Yes.
Then what we end up seeing is what we've seen ailing other cash crops, where other parties and interests come in because my parents are in Kitale right now. They used to farm a lot, and it was very lucrative. It educated people all the way through university. It made sense. Now they look at it and they're like, you know what are you farming for? What are you putting all this in for? Then this thing of starting to give inputs on credit. So you don't realize that you're whittling away your profits before you even get it. The policies around our cash crops need to change. Government would be better placed looking at, are we getting good seed that is giving maximum yield at a decent price? Are we availing good fertilizer at a decent price that is accessible and available? Because those are things that are driving the cost of production up. So at the end of the day, it does not matter if government buys it all. Because even if government had the capacity, assuming had the capacity to buy it all, then what does it do with all that maize? You start hearing scandals of aflatoxin. It was not dried properly. It is now poison. It has to be destroyed. Or it was not been destroyed. It's actually on the shelf. We just have to rethink this entire thing. But over and above that, what ailed the sugar industry? What ailed the cotton industry? What is ailing the maize industry right now is allowing also imports that sabotage our own industries here, that sabotage our own production here. We will not meet this Big Four agenda if we are a consumer society, if we're importing more than what we're generating to export.
That's right.
So the government has to start looking at ways of making the cost of doing business cheaper. We talk about banking, it's becoming more expensive. You talk about petrol, it's becoming more expensive. You're talking about putting up enough silos, close to the farmers so that transport is, those are policies that have to be relooked holistically.
Right, and Honorable Elachi, you head a county assembly. I am not sure there is agriculture in Nairobi, maybe just a little bit of it, but do you think we have managed to utilize the devolved structure to enhance agriculture and specifically the maize sector? How many years now? Six years down the line?
Well, first we have to look at agriculture as being devolved. In Nairobi, yes, we have agriculture, and you find the areas of Ruai and areas of the Greater South. You will do a lot of agriculture. And we have very many people even in Karen with greenhouses, and all that is agriculture. But then what we need to ask ourselves is whether the counties have had the capacity to have now the extension officers that we were talking about in the beginning, who can help. Because you don't need to do farming just because you have big land. There are many different ways of doing that farming, and you'll still have sustainable food security objectives or indicators of how to survive as a country. What we need to ask ourselves as we agree is that, do we really need to import and take advantage when, because this was an advantage taken when the president realized we have a challenge. People, everyone who is an importer, who is a businessman, decided, oh, there's a window that they have put in to bring in exempted maize. And everyone just brought in that maize. Yes. Now that's where we take advantage of our own country. Because if you ask ourselves, did they ever go back to the silos and look at and say, when we look at the cereal boards, there's maize worth this. Yes. It can take us for 4 months. So now we need now to bring in just maize for this month. Right. And now we have pushed, we are saying now, we have to have this maize at flour at 75 shillings, which is good. But are you just doing it for a short term? The way we did again when we were doing campaigns. Yes. Short term, and why are you giving us at 75? Because, you know, I will hope the minister is not giving us at 75 because he realizes it is getting spoiled. So you want to clear. So that is why you are. We want to be told you can sustain Kenyans with maize of 75, flour of 75 for a period of 1 year. Right. A period of 2 years. That is what Kenyans want to hear. That they will not wake up again after 3 months and be told, now it has gone back. And those are those policies now is where we say wrong policies. Sure. Because just make Kenyans to understand, flour will be 90 and it's 90. And we can sustain as a country for a full year. Right. And when we are adding 10 shillings on top of it, reasons are because right now we are declining on this, we have no this. You are putting it at 75. You have maize in your galleries. Farmers are now, as in Western, we are now doing what? Harvesting. Yes. So where are we taking? So you need to even take it at 60 and tell us we will stay up to 1 year because farmers have this maize and maize is there. And then close something called importing maize. Yes. Close it. Why are we importing? Close.
Great insights on the topic about maize. Of course, this is one of the issues that we'll be discussing later on. We'll be having some guests on that and some facts on what has been transpiring in the maize sector since all this controversy began. But thank you both, Speaker, Speaker Beatrice Elachi from the Nairobi County Assembly, as well as Jem Divo, a governance analyst and former magistrate. Thank you so much for joining us on Daybreak to talk about what we just did. And I wish you very well.
As I finalize,
yes,
good news for people deprived of land by kin. I want to tell Kenyans, we have our shows, we have
that's
who
on
have
page 8
gone
of the,
through hell
the Standard
on this land issue. I want to thank the Supreme Court, and I'm saying help Kenyans. They've gone poor. They have fought until everyone has died, until now some of them, it is their grandchildren who are fighting in court. Get out of court now for this. It will